Ayurveda and the Mind, The Healing of Consciousness by David Frawley, Chapter 9. Ego and Self, The Quest for Identity. The Soul and Healing. Getting to the level of the soul is the key to all forms. It's the key to all forms of healing. The soul is the great healer because it is one with both God and nature and carries all their powers and grace. It is not so much that we need to heal our souls as that we have to become aware of our souls. Becoming aware of our souls is the deepest healing possible, not only for the soul, but also for the mind. The awareness of the soul releases all the healing powers inherent within us. The word soul, however, can have many meanings, according to different thinkers. Some call soul our emotional nature, others see it as connected to some heavenly realm that it's our ultimate goal, like an angel. The Vedic idea of the soul, jiva, however, is the first individualized portion of consciousness. The true soul is not an emotion. It's not an emotional belief, but a state of higher awareness beyond all forms and preconceptions. It does not belong to any particular religion and is not in need of salvation. Rather, the soul itself leads to all redemption and transformation because it transcends the limitations of the ego, mind, and body. The Supreme Self, our divine nature. The mind is not the source of consciousness or awareness. Any conditioned consciousness depends upon thought, emotion, and sensation. It is not true consciousness at all. It is like a light reflected in a mirror, not the true source of the light. True consciousness is beyond all object and qualities, and not dependent upon any physical, sensory, or mental instrumentality. This pure consciousness is our true self. In our unconditioned self, we are one with all beings. This is the Supreme Self, Paramatman, or Vedanta, the supreme Vedic philosophy behind Ayurveda. The Supreme Self exists beyond both God and the individual soul. It transcends all beings, all worlds, and all three gunas. While conditioned consciousness, chitta, is composed of thoughts, the true self is thought-free awareness, chit. The self is the real light that illuminates the modifications of the mind and it's never affected by them. It is the unity behind both the soul and God, which includes all the world of nature in the formless absolute. It is the immutable peace at the core of the mind, through which we immediately transcend all psychological problems. Through setting aside the ego and awakening our soul, jiva, we bring ourselves gradually into contact with this higher self. Any contact with our true self leads us beyond all human creaturely problems. Because the purpose of this book is more psychological, we will not examine this self in depth. This occurs in the teachings of Vedanta. To calm psychology disturbances, it is often enough to restore the proper usage of the conditioned mind. Yet to go beyond all sorrow, we must know our true self. And any real healing of the mind benefits from even the slightest contact with our true nature. All the methods given in this book for psychological healing also aid in the higher goal of self-realization. Removing negative conditioning from the mind is necessary for both psychological harmony and self-realization. The difference is that to perceive our true self, a much deeper level of deconditioning has to be achieved than is necessary for resolving our psychological problems like fear, anger, or depression. The yogi's concern is to developing consciousness to create the appropriate vessel for the perception of the self, which is always present, but obscured by our shifting thoughts. The Ayurvedic physician's concern is developing consciousness to counter our ordinary human problems. Purification of consciousness is common to both. It is the most important thing, both for mental health and for spiritual growth. The self and functions of the mind. The three main layers of the mind, consciousness, intelligence, and sense mind, function between ego or false self on one side and the true self or the other. Their actions vary according to the direction in which they are oriented. Directed towards the self, higher consciousness emerge. Directed towards the ego and external world, their higher potential remains latent and they conflict with one another. Consciousness, chitta, is closer to the self, while the sense mind, manas, is closer to the ego. Intelligence, buddhi, which is placed between them, is the key factor in how we orient our awareness. Because of its capacity for decisive perception, intelligence has a power of spiritual transformation greater than either the sense mind or the deeper consciousness. It can empty consciousness of its conditioning and control the sense mind. It can question the ego and discriminate between the lower and the higher self. True intelligence discerns our higher self-identity that leads us to our true nature. This is the identity of consciousness, not the self-image or ego, which depends for its being upon an object or equality. The soul works through the higher aspect of intelligence, which is its development, the mental field according to light of truth. The true self awakens when we bring our awareness to the field of consciousness as a whole by the upward and inward movement of intelligence, otherwise dominated by the downward and outward movement of the sense mind. We become trapped in the forces of the external world, which leads to both ignorance and sorrow. Layers of consciousness and psychological disease. Manas is the outer layer of consciousness through which we are involved with the events of the moment. Buddhi is the middle layer of consciousness that allows us to observe both what is happening in the immediate sense and the long term. Chitta is the deeper layer of consciousness that holds long-term patterns. When we learn something new, like trying our shoes, it is at first a process of manas, through which we perform the action working with the senses. Buddhi is involved as the director of the action, through which we develop our skill in performing it. Once we have learned, becomes second nature, it becomes a function of chitta. We tie our shoes automatically without any deliberation through this power of chitta. In the ordinary person, we can divide the layers of consciousness accordingly. Chitta, unconscious, but also potential higher consciousness. Mana, subconscious. Buddhi, conscious. Ahamkara, self-conscious. Chitta is the total potential field of conditioned consciousness, the field of thought. Manas contains all sensory reactions, which are largely subliminal. In this regards, mana and chitta are close together, and what we take in through the senses automatically influences the unconscious. Only buddhi is the aware part of consciousness. It can divide chitta from manas so that our sensory responses do not condition us at a deeper level. Ahamkara is self-consciousness or ego that makes us vulnerable to external influences. The Atman witnesses and transcends all these functions and is contacted through the higher functions of the buddhi. In the disease process, the doshas or disease-causing factors are the wrong functioning of mind and intelligence, which occurs through the ego. The ego introduces rajas and tamas, the mental doshas, into the mental field in the form of negative thoughts, emotions, and impressions. It makes us use our senses, emotion, and intelligence for selfish enjoyment rather than for developing a higher consciousness. Wrong functioning of intelligence, buddhi, is the main disease-causing factor because it regulates how we use the mind and senses. Chitta is the aspect of the mind that is damaged by these disease-causing factors. Like the tissue of the body damaged by wrong use of the senses organ and poor digestion, consciousness is the substance of the mind damaged by wrong mental activity. For treating the mind, we must eliminate these mental toxins and also repair the mental substance, consciousness. Functions of the mind. While each function of the mind has its natural qualities, gunas, it can be altered by admixture of other gunas. Understanding the gunas of the mind and changing them for tamas to sattvas is the key to mental health and spiritual development. The whole of spiritual development and psychological healing consists of moving from tamasic to sattvic living. We all go through various gunic phases in our daily activity. When we're asleep or mentally dull, we're in a tamasic mode. When we're awake and perceptive, we're in a sattvic mode. When we're active or distracted, we're in a rajasic mode. Generally, what we do in a tamasic or rajasic mode, something ignorant, unfeeling or foolish. Tamas, or something aggressive, agitated or impulsive, rajasic, we regret it while in a sattvic mode. Yet we should not get discouraged. Even an enlightened person has tamasic moments when we may do something that we may later regret. Our karma is not determined by our tamasic moments only, by all the three gunas at play within our mental field. Look at the play of these three gunas in your mental condition. For example, some people will be more sattvic in the morning and turn dull and tamasic in the evening. Others will be dull and tamasic in the morning, but sattvic in the evening. Some people are more active or rajasic in the morning, others in the evening. Generally, sattva should prevail more in the morning and evening, with rajas developing more midday and tamas only during sleep. Note how your environment and associations affect you. Around sattvic spiritual people and situations, you may feel sattvic. Around tamasic and dull people and situations, you will feel dull and depressed. Around rajasic disturbed people and situations, you will feel agitated. See how your life is developing. Are you becoming more sattvic, spiritual, rajasic, busy, or tamasic, dull?